whispers and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on Earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause. Welcome to The Probable Cause. This is a podcast covering legal issues in the criminal justice system in Allen County, Indiana, northeastern Indiana, and the state when it's pertinent. I'm your host, Jamie Duffy, a local journalist, and to my left is my co-host, Michael McAlexander, who is the Allen County Prosecutor. Also contributing by phone today will be my right hand. She is my soul sister when it comes to going over probable causes. I met her around 9 years ago after she lost her son to gun violence, and she became very good at navigating the court system. So welcome all. Today we are going to discuss false accusations, false allegations. A false allegation is a terrible thing and can ruin a person's life. Here at The Probable Cause, we became aware of a situation where somebody was being accused, and we thought it would be a good idea to go over that. But first, the courts. Right now, Mike, we have a trial. Jeffrey Harris, 32 years old, has been at the Allen County Jail since January of last year. He's on trial for an incident that occurred January 6th, 2022, around 1:15 a.m., kicked in the back door of his ex-girlfriend's house, according to the probable cause. This is allegedly. He hasn't been convicted. He shot a gun inside the residence where his ex-girlfriend was, her sister was, her 3-year-old daughter was, and 2 male friends. They were just sort of relaxing. The victim had just come back from work, is what she said in court yesterday. He shot up inside, this is what they're alleging, and then he dragged her out to the middle of the street, Fay Street here in Fort Wayne, and beat her up, and she became unconscious. A lot of neighbors woke up and they called 911, multiple people. She came away with injuries. She was treated at the hospital. He's been charged with burglary with a deadly weapon, felony 2, burglary resulting in bodily injury, a felony 3, criminal recklessness, shooting a firearm into a building, felony 5, and domestic battery by means of a deadly weapon. Now, the closing arguments will probably be Thursday, which is tomorrow, and then we'll find out what the jury thinks about all that. Prosecutors include Tasha Lee and Matthew Skeens and Megan Carmichael. The public defender is Jared Marks, who's been in courtroom a lot lately. He's had a lot of cases. Allen County Superior Court Judge Frangel is presiding. I also thought that maybe we should mention Karen Reed. She has nothing to do with Allen County, Indiana.
True.
But all to do with the nation. I mean, she had a huge base of supporters who all congregated in Boston where her trial was being held. This was her second one. The first one a year ago was a hung jury. Something about her and the case excited these people. She was accused of backing into her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who was I think it was a Boston police officer, and leaving him for dead. And then she came back the next morning at 6 a.m. and they found him. The prosecutor said that she was the one who killed him. She got charged with second-degree murder. The defense attorney said that is not true at all. Something really, really bad happened in the house where there were several people partying, and he was thrown out and he died there after being beaten. Now, the coroner said that O'Keefe died of blunt force trauma and hypothermia. And this is where it got interesting for me. When I read the injuries, I got a little skeptical about what she was charged with. So here we go. The 46-year-old cop had bloody cuts on his right arm. His eyes were swollen shut. His clothes were covered in blood and vomit. That's according to the prosecutors. He's transported to Boston's Good Samaritan Hospital. He was pronounced dead later that morning. Now, an autopsy found that he had multiple skull fractures, as well as cuts to the back of his head and nose. The coroner said he died of hypothermia and blunt force trauma. So my right hand and I were talking about, wouldn't this be neat if we could get the autopsy photos and the notes and turn them over to Dr. Scott Wagner here, who is the forensic pathologist in northeastern Indiana, and let him take a look and tell us what he thinks, because he did have cuts on him. He had cuts on his head and his nose. And I thought it doesn't match up with things that I've seen in court, but then I'm not an expert.
I think, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think once the case is disposed of, you can FOIA and get the.
Depends how their FOIA law is set up. Freedom of Information Act. Ours investigatory records can be held, and certainly things like autopsy photos are generally considered confidential, and they don't release those even after a case is over.
Even to the family?
Well, maybe to the family, or at least allow them to see them. But autopsy photos can be fairly gruesome.
Oh, yeah. But that doesn't mean they don't count as evidence.
Right. I mean, we frequently need to put them into a trial, but frequently they are somewhat limited. We don't put in a ton of them, and the courts recognize that. And there's case law that recognizes the need to put them in for the jury's understanding, but not necessarily to parade them. We're always being cautioned to not go overboard on that.
Well, I must say, I mean, I haven't followed it as closely as some people I know. I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting to get a second opinion? The two jurors who spoke after the trial was over said that there were a lot of holes in the prosecution's case. I imagine the prosecutors aren't feeling too good right now, right?
Well, no one likes to lose. And when you try a case a second time, it's particularly difficult. I'm always hesitant to comment on other cases when I haven't looked at the evidence. What was that?
I thought that your case rate is high on retrials.
Yeah, me too.
It can be. A lot of times it's good because you learn maybe.
You get a practice.
Yeah. I mean, you learn what the jury's looking for, especially if you get a chance to talk to the jury afterwards and you find out what their questions were. In some cases, you can delve deeper into it and find more information. Sadly, a lot of times, you've given everything that you've got. It's very frustrating when you hear back from a jury, well, we think he did it, but we just needed a little more information, a little more evidence. On this one, it sounds as though on a homicide case, it's pretty difficult to convict somebody of murder if you don't have a pretty good cause of death established. And it sounds like on this, the question was, if she did certain things to him, did he die because of hitting him with the car, or did he die because he was drunk and passed out and the cold got him? And they may not have had enough information to kind of go between those to show what was the actual cause of death.
There were also a situation there with some text messages from a law enforcement, the state police who were investigating it. I think they thought they were friends, and I think that was, but anyway, those two jurors felt that Karen Reed got justice, but John O'Keefe did not get justice. So I thought that was interesting. And I don't know if they're going to go back and talk to those other people or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Supposedly, I think there's a civil case for a wrongful death that the family brought against Karen Reed. So there may be a part 2 or part 3 to this.
Oh my gosh, you get acquitted of one and then so.
Well, I mean, that does happen. If you remember the O.J. Simpson case, he was acquitted in the criminal trial, and then a civil jury found him responsible for the deaths.
The burden of proof is much lower in a civil trial, though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the burden of proof is much lower.
Yes.
Yeah, in a criminal trial, it's a preponderance of the evidence, or everything points to guilty. But in a civil trial, it's just 51% that he did it.
I think it's the opposite. We're beyond a reasonable doubt is the criminal standard.
Yeah.
Preponderance is civil.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's beyond reasonable doubt.
I know what you meant. But yeah, that's it is a different standard.
Well, it just means in the civil cases that you owe a lot of money if you're found guilty, as we're going to find out today with false allegations, which is what actually we're here to talk about, although it's always fun to talk about court cases. I'm just wondering if you have any estimation as to how many false allegations that people come to you, the Allen County Prosecutor, and your department, and try and file lawsuits about false claims, false allegations, false accusations. Is it common?
Some of it is we get a lot of complaints from people. The question is whether they're criminal or not. And then you get into various disputes. Think of custody situations with children where they're alleging misconduct by the other party, whether it's sexual or physical or emotional abuse type of situations.
Is that the preponderance of what you get? Child custody related false allegations, the children are being mistreated?
Well, I mean, we don't have too many people walking in the door and accusing somebody falsely of murder.
True. Or burglary.
Usually it's more in that coming out of family stuff. And sometimes I don't even know if I would consider it false allegations. It's maybe false interpretations of certain behavior, that he did this or he did that. And it's something that may be subject to an interpretation of one person's, say, discipline of a child may be appropriate for that person, but inappropriate to the other person. And then they maybe want criminal charges on it.
Well, aren't there
That's the
laws
job of our
concerning
office.
child discipline now? Like you can't beat your child with a rod, for instance?
That's true. Well, I can't say it has to be appropriate discipline. The courts have given a lot of latitude to parents. I know in that kind of thing, you're trying to look for what is the community standard. Certainly our attitude about corporal punishment today is a whole lot different than it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
That's absolutely right.
In school, I can remember having in middle school a teacher with a fraternity paddle type of thing, and that was fairly common. Today, you don't hear of that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, those I mean, I think that's an example of where standards have changed over time as to what is appropriate and what isn't. And that's one of the, I guess, tricks, if you will, of a prosecutor's office is trying to determine what that community standard is. What we often refer to as jury appeal. Is this going to play well to a jury? I can remember years ago, any kind of drug offense, people were outraged by it. In recent years, when we've had, say, a possession of marijuana case on its own, the first question in jury selection you ask is, how many of you think marijuana should be decriminalized, legalized, made into
Must
just
be hard
like
to get a
traffic?
jury on that one.
Well,
I bet you're seeing more and more hands go up when you
that is exactly
Well,
correct.
it says the polls they take in Indiana, not to veer too much from this, it's either 60 or 70%. I think it's 70% of Hoosiers believe there should be decriminalization, that there should be legal marijuana.
I think most of the polls, it sometimes depends on how you phrase the question, but most people, at least if you believe the pollsters, believe it should have either be medical marijuana or legalized in some fashion or other.
You mean people are actually taking this to the box, as they say, a marijuana possession charge?
Yeah.
I definitely want to cover one of those. Can I get cameras in the courtroom and
Talk to the judge. But it's just an example of community standards change over time. And I think that's probably the easiest one to look at from the 50s and 60s with reefer madness
Oh yeah.
to a much more open attitude towards it.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing if you talk to people about fentanyl or
Oh,
opioids.
absolutely.
And I think that difference is that too many people have taken things that they thought were one thing and they end up overdosing and dying. And everybody knows somebody who's died from an overdose. And so it becomes very real to them. So when you talk about somebody selling fentanyl, it is very serious.
But see, right there, you're offering an argument for legalization. Because if you have legalization, then you have regulation. Then you have marijuana that is being inspected rather than growing in illegal grows out west, being sprayed at least twice with banned pesticides. Hoosiers who, can't get up to Michigan or over to Ohio or whatever, are breathing in whatever the banned pesticides are. I don't even know what they are. I don't even want to know what they are at this point. So to me, you're giving me an argument for legalization. But I know as a prosecutor, you can't say that because the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council is still against legalization and decriminalization of marijuana. So
that is correct.
That is correct. Absolutely. Every time
and you
I
were
call
correct on my position that I am opposed to legalizing marijuana.
Well, you should be. I mean, you're the Allen County prosecutor.
There's also there is a drug that mimics the effects of marijuana without the high for pain relief. So,
which one is that?
I knew
everybody's going to be running out to get it.
It's well known. You can Google it and you'd find it.
I don't. I know everybody says, "Oh, she's for it," and everything else.
Or it's what is it? How's it ingested, Mike?
Gummy
pill form, I believe.
Pill form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look it up my right hand while we're sitting here. I'm just kidding. Anyway, what I want to do is get on to false allegations, and we won't get to it unless I force you guys to talk about it. We did have a case recently where there was a false allegation, false accusation made. It was the Pike's Pub May 30th beating of a black man. There were 6 suspects. There was one who was misidentified by one of the people who was inside the bar. She told the sheriff's deputies, "Oh yes, that's so-and-so," and it turned out not to be him. They did their best looking through all that video and speaking to witnesses and everybody else. Charges were almost immediately dropped against that man, and then they were able to identify the 6th suspect who was taken into custody, I believe, last Friday, which would be June something or other, June 20th. And so right then and there, I mean, I don't want to beat up on the sheriff's deputies and the sheriff's department because they were under pressure to produce these 6 suspects. I mean, the community was up in arms. They were at the courthouse green. They were demanding justice right away, and they did their best. So,
well, I would differentiate between and I'm not going to talk about that case, but misidentifying somebody is different than making a false accusation. I would say false accusation is when you know something is wrong and you intentionally point the finger at someone else. More of where we would probably get into something if somebody makes a false allegation of child abuse, physical abuse,
or child molestation.
Or the common one, or at least perceived, is if somebody's accused of rape. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen. But
there have been some probable causes I didn't write up because of that, because I had questions.
Misidentification does happen. I think the system has kind of corrected for that over the years. I did a case several years ago that the defense brought in studies on racial misidentification or cross-racial misidentification, where people of opposite races were more likely to misidentify people because they didn't distinguish as well between the features, basically meaning African Americans were better at differentiating and identifying African Americans. Caucasians were better at differentiating between Caucasians. So, and we have some common statements, everybody looks the same kind of thing. And we have various
In this
stereotypes.
case, the two men were about the same age, or close to the same age. They did have gray hair. They both had facial hair. And the woman at the bar said, "Oh yes, I know him, and I know the bar owner, and I know the money behind the bar, and all of that." So she was, she was helping identify them. And you can see when I saw the one clip from the video, it's like, yeah, could be.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, again, that's where I'm making a differentiation between a false accusation and a misidentification.
Right. Well, that's fair. So the question is, a lot of people are familiar with this. We know it's a horrible thing. What do you do? What about a lawsuit? Well, there are such things as a defamation suit or a malicious prosecution suit. And it's when someone makes false accusations that cause harm to another person. They have to make it public in some way, I think. I can't just accuse you of something and then sue you for it. It means that a third party has to hear that accusation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a civil action.
Okay. So there's professional, there's sexual, there's criminal, there's social media. And so defamation involves making a false statement of fact that harms someone's reputation. Libel, as we learned in journalism school, is defamation that is written or in permanent form like social media. So people on Nosy Neighbors, be careful. And then whereas slander is defamation in a spoken form. But you have to prove those things. What would you say to that, Mike?
Like most allegations in lawsuits, you got to prove them. The standard of proof, as we talked already, is different on those. There's also, I think, different standards for the person who is being libeled or slandered. If they're a public figure, it's a different standard than for private individuals.
I actually have that further down in the script, that a public figure, and what you define by a public figure, is the burden of proof is much higher.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as a journalist, I'm allowed to take a photo in a public spot if someone is speaking publicly, whether they want me to or not. I did learn that. They don't become a true public figure, but if you're over at the courthouse green and you're up there and you're protesting against something and I capture you in my image, you can politely ask me, please don't use that photo. But you are acting as a public figure. There's somebody like, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex who have no protections. That's when they have to get into malicious prosecution.
Right.
Which I think actually they have. So the key elements to prove in that are the original legal case was resolved in the falsely accused person's favor. There was no probable cause for the initial legal action, and the person who initiated the original case acted maliciously. That is malicious prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get those cases here?
No, as I said, that's a civil matter.
But don't you handle civil matters here?
Child support, gun forfeitures, criminal forfeitures, but it's through civil. But no, malicious prosecution, I think because it says prosecutor on it, people think it's a criminal matter, but it's not. It's an action brought by a civilian against another person.
So when they file that, where does it go if it doesn't go through the prosecutor's office?
Through a regular civil court.
Right, and so then it gets handled by one of our judges here.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like somebody I suppose, could want to file a civil suit against me or my office for malicious prosecution. That could happen. However, generally we have immunity for anything that we file in a criminal matter.
Well, I guess there has to be some protection. So a lot of times you see in civil suits too that there can be damages, punitive damages. So what can be recovered? In a successful lawsuit, the falsely accused person can seek compensation for various damages, including reputational harm, emotional distress, and financial losses. That includes legal fees, lost income due to the false accusations, or legal proceedings.
And again, all of that's civil.
All right. But, I mean, you are familiar with all of that. So, and also, this advice right here says you might want to go get an attorney, which I think is great advice, don't you? I mean, if you're being falsely accused of something, I don't see how you can just handle it on your own. You can try, but you need somebody.
Well, it's really sad that, I mean, now that they have made so many advances in DNA and in ways to identify killers, that now families 30 and 40 years later are getting justice because the prosecutors and the police department kept the evidence in case of this. It's sad that there are people sitting in prison, and probably we're going to find out more and more as technology gets greater and greater robustness and accuracy.
Well, and I agree with you. And I think, again, that's an example of kind of a shifting standard. A lot of those exoneration cases that you saw were ones that relied on eyewitness identification, and later improvements in scientific investigations, especially DNA, freed a lot of people that had been convicted based on that. And I think that has seeped into the public consciousness now, that if we go in on a robbery case where somebody who doesn't previously know the party, say a gas station robbery kind of thing, and the person says, say the cashier says, that's the person who robbed me, we're not as likely to take that to the jury unless we've got some other evidence to corroborate it, because jurors are hesitant now to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody's eyewitness testimony standing alone is sufficient.
And I can't stress enough how good John Grisham's book is framed, is what it's called. Yes, they do date back to the 70s, 80s, maybe some of the 90s, excuse me, about how these people stayed in prison and were wrongly accused. And it wasn't just eyewitnesses, although there were some eyewitnesses. I gave my right hand the book to, although I think she's been struggling to get the the energy to read it. But when you read it, you see how sometimes the prosecutors are involved, sometimes the police, sometimes judges will sit on making a judgment, and it really damns the entire criminal justice system. So we're all human, Let's just give each other a break.
Yes, and some of those cases are very sad. I know the Bar Association sponsored a speaker, a man who'd been on death row, who wrote a book, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it was...
Was it here in Indiana or down in Louisiana?
It was Mississippi or Alabama, I think.
I think I might even know which one.
And they made a movie out of it.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it was a very compelling story. And sadly, I think history has documented those things have happened. You've also had situations where a prosecutor can get stubborn or intentionally looking for limelight, sadly. The Duke lacrosse players 10, 15 years ago was an example of a prosecutor not following the evidence. I think that's something that
Except for, something really sleazy went on there. I remember actually paying a lot of attention to that because my boy played lacrosse and I kind of know the reputation. But he completely misidentified one guy who wasn't even there. So, I mean, they had to throw it out.
right. But
I
what
feel
I'm
like they
saying
were
is,
all from New Jersey or New York.
what I'm saying is, the prosecutors I know in this office have always tried to uphold their ethics and try to ensure that we don't do anything wrong that way.
But could it have been also a case where, just like the situation with Pike's Pub, it's like you've got to you've got to charge them right away, and they feel pressure. Wasn't there an
Well,
election coming up in that situation, as I recall?
I'm not sure. I mean, you're always faced with the pressure of going forward. I mean, in the standard murder case, there's always that pressure to make a decision if you've got enough, because you don't want the person doing it again before you arrest them. On the other hand, you also have to balance that if you don't have the evidence and you think there's a possibility additional evidence will be developed or will come forward, you don't want to go too quick into a case where you go in on a weak case and you lose it, and then you can never file it again. Double jeopardy prevents that. So, right hand, the pressure as a family member, how important it is to resolve the case, and you want something done. And certainly I understand that, and prosecutors understand that. But they do try to balance that other side of it. So there's always pressure. Some cases, have more
Publicity.
public interest and create more controversy. But part of what we do is to try to look at everything that's there. It's like doing a officer-involved shooting kind of case. That it's important to look at everything because sometimes the first reports you get on a case are not accurate. And that's why you want to be swift, but you want to be accurate, I guess.
You want justice.
Yes.
So here's a lady named Sarah, and she weighed in on Quora, which is one of my favorite places to go when I'm looking for something, and it's exactly what we're talking about. Because she was falsely accused, she was able to remedy the situation. She said, "I do, however, become more keenly aware of similar cases where people are falsely accused by powerful people and even spend lifetimes in prison as convicted felons based on false accusations. False accusations are evil." And just like when I go back to that book by John Grisham, it was just so good. And I would read it in bits and pieces because I kept getting so angry. So I wanted to go back to this guy named Blaine Cluton. And he's from Oregon, and he's an attorney, and he's giving tips to people for what should happen, what you should consider doing when you're falsely accused. You should not have contact with the accuser, he says, which I think is good advice. Tampering, that could be tampering with a witness if you do that. If there's a criminal violation, it could be violating a protective order. I would think you'd know if a protective order is out against you, but there you have it. He says, gather as much information as possible and consider hiring a private investigator. Costs money.
He's talking about primarily in a civil.
Well, it could be criminal though, right? I mean, if you're falsely accused of...
Well, if it's a criminal matter, you're going to either be hire your own attorney or you're going to have a public defender appointed for you.
In that case, I think I would want a private investigator.
It would have to come to the level of like stalking or that kind of charge for it to become criminal. Right, Mike?
Yes, but I mean, if somebody, well, let's say domestic violence, somebody accuses the guy of, or let's say the ex-girlfriend accuses him of hitting her, and he says, "I didn't do it."
Right.
he's going to have a defense lawyer that would, whether it's appointed or hired, that will try to look at when was the allegation made? Is there corroborating evidence of the injuries? Were pictures taken? Is there any other likely cause that could have caused this other than his bad act? You would look at all of this. Does the timeline work? If there was a delay in reporting, why the delay? If there weren't any pictures taken, why not? You would look at all of those things, and that's the stuff you then would present at trial or present to the prosecutor. People always forget that the prosecutor is not just there to win. The prosecutor has an ethical duty to search for the truth and justice. And I know that sounds a little facetious at times.
That's what we want to believe.
But that's what we want to believe, and that's what we do. Are we human? Can we get too invested in our case? It happens. Sometimes after you lose a case, you get a perspective on it, and you can go back and look at it and say, well, I understand why the jury found him not guilty. And you look at some factors that maybe you didn't apply initially. And sometimes they may be factual, that you didn't put a lot of weight in on it, but the jury did. Sometimes it's the status of the person. Sometimes it's the crime itself, as we talked about with marijuana. Some people may just say, I just don't think it should be illegal, so I'm not going to convict. Now, we ask those questions in voir dire, but if you talk about false answers, we do wonder sometimes about, are people always being straight, or do they know themselves that well? When we ask people, are you the type of person that is willing to make a decision on this case? And they say yes, and then they don't. Is that a lack of self-knowledge or a lack of understanding their own personality? So, there are just things that happen in trials. I mean, this is where dealing with human beings is the great unknown that we get into with this. But
I always take a look at the jury and think, okay, which way?
no, we all do, and usually we're not very good at it.
Sometimes you can, though, tell when a juror is like over the testimony that's going on and just like bored because they start like nodding off, and they like you can tell the ones that are vested in the case and the ones that are just going to go along with the herd, probably.
Yes, there's various theories on jury selection to not get too many leaders.
I am sure there's a science of it. All right, so actually I think one other thing that Blaine tells us to do, a couple other things. Don't admit to anything and don't sign anything. That sounds like very good advice to me. Limit the scope of others who are involved. Anyone you are telling about your case could talk to your accuser. And that could go criminal or civil, in my opinion. He's also telling everybody to reduce stress, which can be impossible sometimes. Meditate, exercise, and pray. This again, I don't know if I'm crossing the line into civil here. Maybe I should do social media first, because that's something that affects so many people. I know there were times on the Wayne social media posts where I would write a story, usually about a case, and then somebody would say, well, why didn't that reporter go out and get this? And I would hold my tongue, because it is not worth engaging with people who don't know what they're talking about, right? You have to sit there and go, yeah, you go through 1,500 cases, honey, on a deadline. But it says when facing false accusations on social media, the key is to stay calm, document everything, and seek other legal advice, and avoid engaging in public arguments. Now, this is almost hilarious to read because that's all we read on social media is arguments. I'm on social media a lot, so I know what I'm talking about. This can escalate the situation. Instead, focus on gathering evidence, crafting a measured response, and potentially pursuing legal action if necessary. One of the things he says is assess the accusation. Is it a personal attack, a factual misrepresentation, or a potential legal issue like defamation? And then you try and understand the potential impact. If somebody is attacking you on social media, your first instinct might be to attack them. And I've seen it so often, especially on ones like Nosy Neighbors. You don't read Nosy Neighbors, do you? Oh my gosh, you're really missing everything. Okay, so it says document everything. Take screenshots of the posts, comments, any related content, save emails, messages, or other forms of communication related to the accusation. That seems like smart if you were being accused in a professional way.
Well, I think that's good advice for anything that you think is going into litigation. It's why, as an employer,
or for anything, right?
well, as an employer, if you get sued by an employment action by a former employee, if you don't have stuff documented of poor work performance, and suddenly they've worked for you for several years and they have no write-ups, and then they get 3 write-ups in 6 weeks, it will later look like you're retaliating against them. So if you have problems, it behooves you to not just sweep it under the rug or say, well, they'll do better next time. You're smarter to document that as you go along so that it doesn't look like you're retaliating.
Right, or know the employment laws. So that's important to know employment laws. And we do have employment lawyers here in town because
yes, we do
talk to one.
But this is, I think, true for any kind of potential litigation. And a lot of times people don't realize they're heading that way till they're already in it. Because most of us don't keep a diary of every wrong that has been done to us or every opinion we have.
Or some people keep too much. They're paranoid and they see something bad in every comment.
And the danger with social media is there's so many opinions out there that may or may not be based on good facts. You also have to look and see what is the source for whatever this so-called opinion or fact is. And if you rely on some of the stuff that's out there without doing your homework to know who is this person. I mean, because so many people use false names or nicknames on their Twitter accounts and stuff that it's hard to know where their information is coming from. So,
I mean, some of the things that people say about public figures too. I mean, I don't know how they handle it. So they're also saying here, besides taking screenshots and documenting all that, keep a record of when the accusations were made and any relevant dates or times associated with the situation. You may have to go back into your emails and back into that, and then monitor how the accusation is spreading and who is sharing it and who's commenting on it. If you feel like you're in danger of something like that. Here's something I thought I was discussing with my right hand last night. I really like this one. You can get an attorney and get him to write a cease and desist letter and to the person making the false accusation, demanding they stop spreading misinformation and remove the content. Because that seems like it might put fear into somebody who might be inclined to continue spreading it. What do you know about cease and desist letters?
Well, it's usually considered like a warning shot. Again, more in the civil. We do not do that as a prosecutor's office. Generally, there have been over the years a few situations where, say, a neighborhood harassment kind of situation where people are accusing their neighbor of doing something that we might, or another example would be truancy. we talked about runaways and
We
truancy.
did, yeah.
Send a letter to the family or the parents saying your son or daughter appears to being absent from school without due reasons. This may violate Indiana code, da 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 da.
But that would be a school writing the letter, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
There was actually a letter that went out over my signature for a long time on truancy cases, that advising a family that if this behavior continued, it may result in court action, that we would ask them to come in. So it's kind of it can be cease and desist, or maybe you better start doing this. But in the neighbor situations, you may have allegations, or in the domestic violence situation, or domestic harassment, I guess, that stuff is going on, but perhaps it hasn't risen to a level that you can prove it quite yet. But it's one of those, well, no one else would be doing this. So you write the letter saying, we know about this, we are going to be monitoring it, would advise that we will take appropriate legal steps if you continue, if this is you and you continue to do this.
I can remember out in the country, we got a letter, our family, accusing us of making noise on purpose so that this man couldn't hunt in the neighboring property. And of course it wasn't true at all. Yeah. And we were totally in shock. I mean, we didn't like the idea that particularly that he was using a crossbow, but so anyway, I just have one more interesting thing. This guy's obviously been through some situations, right? His name is Daniel. I got him off Quora. And he was talking about smear campaigns, which we've all seen those in the press, and in political campaigns. Some of them pop up to mind what they're saying. He said, as if a narcissist, he's really big on narcissists, this guy, wants to ruin your reputation by spreading lies about you and recruiting flying monkeys that jump on the hate train, here's what I would do. And this is to remember, this is like true in everything. He who angers you controls you. And that is really true. If you can't control your emotions, that person is controlling you. It's very easy to get really, really angry and to want to confront this person about their lies once you find out. To defend yourself and tell the narcissist to say the truth. However, this is exactly what they want you to do and how they want you to respond. Because their lies are so twisted that when you respond with anger and defensiveness to the false accusations, you only reinforce the narcissist's false claims against you, namely that you are crazy, abusive, emotionally unstable, a narcissist, abnormal, whatever. I think that's true. It's like, you shouldn't say that about me. No. Say, see, there it is. She is that way. This in turn gives the narcissist more power and credibility in their flying monkey's eyes. In other words, the people who are his posse, who go along with him saying what he does about you, right? Therefore, and I know this isn't easy, you got to remain calm and not allow their stupid game to get you off center. To remind yourself that you know the truth, and the people who believe this person, the truth will always come out. I'm not exactly sure about that. I think if people have gone to their deaths without people knowing what the truth is. It's not a question of if it happens, but when it happens, no matter how well the truth is concealed. Let people talk behind your back, for you can't really prevent or control this. And I was reminded of something that Oscar Wilde once said. He was like a 19th, early 20th century writer in England. He said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
Yeah, isn't there another saying, something like any publicity is good publicity, or something like that?
Yes. There's also, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
But see, I always said to my boys, that's not true, because words hurt more than sticks and stones. I mean, we can say that and make ourselves feel better, but honestly, words are bad. They're
Words
horrible.
can be weapons.
They are weapons, and if people use them against you. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about false allegations. I don't know if we're able to cover everything or make people feel better about their situation. That's what I was really hoping we could do. But you know that you can write a cease and desist letter. You can sue somebody. You can, I don't know, talk to a counselor about it, and talk to somebody else who can give you good advice, and just try and remain calm. Does anybody want the last word before I say goodbye? No?
Just remember, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case, you have to prove your case. You have to have evidence. If you don't have the evidence, then you probably ought to follow some of the other things and just ignore it.
No, that is a good idea, because I tell people when they bring cases to me, do you have documentation? And I do need that if you want me to write up your case. So, my right hand, are you okay? Are you good, as they say?
Yeah, I think that this was very informative, and it applies, like Mike has said several times, to both civil and criminal cases. It can happen, but the more proof you have, the better off your case is. And they are throwing cases out every day because they don't have enough evidence. So keep everything.
Okay, so this has been The Probable Cause. We are so glad that you joined us. You can find all our stories and our podcasts on www.theprobablecause.com, or you can actually go to our Facebook page, The Probable Cause. You'll find us there. I sometimes post stories that I don't post on my regular Facebook page, so I wish you would like us and follow us. And so this is The Probable Cause, and for now, goodbye. This episode is filmed and edited by Frosty Pictures. The Probable Cause is produced by Maumee Media.
Worried when I crossed the Michigan line, a cop from Steuben County waiting on I-69. A headlamp went out while he pulled me over, charged me with possession after I rolled down the window. Now that's skunk. Indians a trick when it comes to weed. It's like, who doesn't smoke or use gummies? Your grandpa, your brother, your rich friend from school? Hell, throw in the whole courthouse and my attorney too. It's time those assholes change these stupid laws. It ain't worth the paper for a probable cause. Sitting on a bar stool in my usual place, this guy next to me said he was looking for some cocaine. Hell, I just sold him an 8-ball with a little piece off for me. But my buyer was a cop? Should've known he was a creep. So I'm a dealer, right? You gotta be kidding. It's a rich man's drug. I just take it because I'm injured. 8 years in Westville with a monkey on my back. There's more drugs in here than you can shake a shank at. One dirty drug test, man, this system's flawed. Undercover screwed me in my probable cause. Street crimes never did me no favors. I'm hooked on Fetty. I'm a junkie, not a felon. Told that son of a bitch on the way to lockup. I can't seem to shake it. I need help, not mocking. What do you want from someone who's been through the system? Drugs all through the house before mom and dad went to prison. Throw me in jail and give me a fine? Someday I'll be dead and away from your kind. Now I'm at the courthouse in front of a judge. Can't say my public defender cares for me much. Crimes are committed on both sides of the law. God help me now with this probable cause. C-shift never gets old. Anything can happen when you're out on patrol. You think I'm just eating donuts, man? Give me a break. Nothing on this job is a piece of cake. Lights and sirens activated. This knucklehead wants to chase. Baby mama at the scene just spit in my face. Wife's worried that someday I won't be pulling up at all. You'll read about my killer in a probable cause. Man. She went through my phone and she seen my text. I told her forget it. It was just my ex. She took a swing and knocked me flat. Man, I went wild and hit her back. Judge slapped me with a no contact order. Now she's got the kids and she's staying with her mother. So she started it all and I have to take the fall. You can read my whole story in the probable cause. When I was young, caught a case for dealing and did my time. Yeah, I got a record, but I was doing fine. Running my own business on the southeast side. Yeah, I got a gun. I kept it on hand. Told the cop my reason, thought he'd understand. In this neighborhood, you need some protection. Attorney thought I could get just community corrections, but the judge decided to send me to prison. Can't get ahead no matter how hard I try. Read the probable cause, it'll make you cry.
Whispers and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said. rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on Earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause.